I've clicked onto the Global Tropical Overview for September the 13th, 2023. As is always the case in these videos, let the dispatcher are mine alone, and when making decisions ahead of any tropical cyclones, look towards your local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So it's very busy in the Atlantic today. We've got 3 systems on the board, as you'd normally expect in the Atlantic. Hurricane Lee, we're going to go into detail on this, but the short summary is the system is going to continue tracking north and bring tropical storm conditions to Bermuda tomorrow and over the next couple of days. And then after that, it's going to push north, and significant impacts are likely now, or becoming more likely at least, in Atlantic Canada and the northeastern United States this weekend as the system pushes north. We also have Hurricane Margot here, southwest of the Azores. This system is going to meander around here for the next several days and will pose really no threat to the Azores at all. The only main impact to the Azores is probably just going to be higher surf, but that's normal for tropical cyclones passing nearby. But we also have Invest 98L and 97L. I can't remember which one became dominant, but this general mass of thunderstorms is likely to develop over the next several days, and it will likely gain latitude here under the influence of some ridging south of Margot that will carry it northwest. Not expecting this to come just directly west into the Caribbean. You can thank Lee and Margot for blocking some of the ridging that would normally take or allow that to take shape. But this system is really not anything to worry about, at least for this week. We may have to talk about this next week, but we'll deal with that when we get there. We're going to focus on Lee today, as this is a very significant situation unfolding, and we may be looking at potential hurricane impacts in the Northeast and Atlantic Canada this week. But here's the zoomed in visible loop. You can see the broad structure overall. This system is much more broad since my last video. It has undergone a lot of internal changes. We've had a lot of eyewall replacement cycles take place, and this system has grown as a result of those. Now, it's important to remember that eyewall replacement cycles can be deceiving. They are good in the sense that they weaken down the top winds, but they are not good in the sense that they expand the overall wind field. So the reason the max winds the reason they go down is because the wind field is becoming more and more broad, and we now have hurricane force winds extending 100 miles away from the center of circulation. It's very expansive, and tropical storm force wind field is much greater than that, and you'll see that in the National Hurricane Center forecast code that I'll show you at the end of this video. But this system being broad does help us out in a way as well. There's a lot of upwelled waters ahead of the storm from Franklin, and as you have a lot of tropical storm force winds ahead of the eye, where it's tracking, this will be able to upwell cooler waters where Franklin was ahead of the eye. So in turn, the winds ahead of it are cooling the water quicker, and by the time the eye gets over those waters, the water will be cool enough to where it will really not be able to strengthen too much. And that will allow the gradual weakening trend that we're seeing so far to continue. I really wouldn't expect rapid weakening until we get north of the Gulf Stream, and I'll show you the seafloor temperature plot in just a moment. But here's the recon plane flight from earlier this afternoon. You can see just the expanse of hurricane winds at flight level. This is at flight level, not at the surface, but pretty expansive. And you can see on this product, you can see the expanse of the hurricane force winds in Category 2 hurricane force winds here. This is about 100 miles per hour, extending away 100 miles from the center on the southeast, east, and southern sides, with hurricane force winds extending away in similar fashion on the northern, northwest, and western sides. You can also see there is a little bit of a area here near the core, northwest of there, where the winds are a bit weaker, only about 50 knots. That matches up well with an earlier microwave pass we got earlier. You can also see some of the winds here in the northwest are a bit weaker, northwest of the eye. What I think might be happening is, since the system is so much more broad, it's able to bring in some dry air. So we've got more dry air being able to be drawn into the center. But alongside that, the system has not really been moving too fast, and it's likely already upwelling cooler waters. So that, coupled with the dry air, may be impacting that internal structure a bit. And all of that will continuously lead to a gradual weakening trend. Now, in terms of the track, kind of spoiled the ending there, but in terms of track, the general pattern that we talked about a few days ago remains the same. This trough over the Great Lakes is going to accelerate the storm northwards over the next day, and this will get it very close to Bermuda, thankfully not getting the hurricane force wind field in all likelihood on shore, but tropical storm force wind field definitely on shore. But this trough is going to leave the scene pretty quickly. And there's a ridge behind it. You might be able to just pick it out there west of this trough. So this trough moves out. This ridge is going to move in. And you'll see as I play this out, you can see that the storm accelerates pretty quickly up north, but it starts to slow down because it's getting more of a westerly push from this ridge. And you'll see that as the system slows down, it starts to bend back towards the northwest to eventually where it comes very close to the northeastern United States. And you can see later down the line on this model run, as this secondary trough comes in behind this ridge and starts pulling it back northeast, we now have the storm centered just offshore of Maine and just offshore of Nova Scotia. This is a bit different than what model runs had shown yesterday. Most model runs yesterday were showing, or at least the GFS was showing more into Nova Scotia. The European was actually all the way into Cape Cod on that. Now that's still a possibility, but the European has also come more into agreement with the GFS. So just to outline the pattern, here we are by day 2. Here's the storm. We have a trough here lifting out. We have a ridging here taking shape behind it, and here's our secondary trough behind the ridge. The system has already been accelerating northwards, and now that ridge takes shape, it comes northwest, and we get its general same track as the GFS. Now, this is a very sensitive scenario. There's a lot of questions still on exactly how this trough is going to evolve. Is the system a little bit faster, and maybe doesn't pick up Lee or accelerate Lee as much as some of these models are forecasting? That could lead to maybe the system being a little bit further south, maybe a little bit further west. That's also a possibility than a lot of these models depict. If that is the case, we could potentially get the system closer to the northeastern United States. On the other hand, if this system is a bit slower, this could accelerate the storm more than models are forecasting and could get a solution similar to the GFS yesterday and get it to come into Nova Scotia, maybe closer to Halifax. There's a lot of uncertainty there on exactly how this pattern is going to evolve, and it's a very sensitive pattern, but the general idea here for Atlantic Canada and the Northeast is we are looking at more and more likely of a chance of a hurricane coming in, weakening hurricane, but it's still likely going to be a hurricane moving into your region. Now here's the HASS model. This is the tropical storm and hurricane force wind field. You can see just how expansive it is here. It's about 36 hours out, or late Thursday night, and you can see the tropical storm force winds here over Bermuda. And you can see as the system comes north, the wind field will weaken below hurricane force, at least for a time on the model. We still have hurricane force winds on the southern side, which makes sense given the Gulf Stream is running through there. You would have the strongest winds there on the southern side, but as the system comes north, it slows down. And the good news is, because we have these cooler seasurface temperatures north of the Gulf Stream, as the system passes all the upwelling, it will gradually weaken. But once it gets north of the Gulf Stream, it will likely weaken quite substantially just because of how cold these waters are. And this is a normal thing with the Gulf Stream to have a strong gradient of very favorable sea surface temperatures and very unfavorable sea surface temperatures. But as the system slows down because of that ridge building in north of the system, it will spend a little bit more time over this water. This isn't going to be like your normal northeast hurricane to where it's racing up here and barely has time to weaken. The system is going to be racing up here, but it's going to slow down a little bit before it actually comes ashore. And that will likely weaken it. You can see just the weakening taking shape on the HASS model. But keep in mind, there's still going to be tropical storm force winds here, potentially hurricane force, especially where the center of circulation goes. And alongside that, with the tropical storm force winds expanding across the northeast and Nova Scotia, you'll still likely have some coastal flooding issues and storm surge issues as the system pushes through. This is the current 5-day forecast come from the National Hurricane Center. You can see tropical storm warning in place for Bermuda, tropical storm watch now in place from Rhode Island all the way up to Maine. I think that might be about towards Bangor or Portland. And you can see a hurricane watch now in place from, I think that might be Portland. If I'm making that mistake, I apologize. But you can see all the way up to the Canadian border, hurricane watches going there in Maine. Can't remember the last time we had a hurricane watch in Maine, but in Halifax or Nova Scotia rather, no watches or warnings as of yet, but I'd imagine the Canadian Hurricane Center will communicate with the National Hurricane Center soon to get those at least within the next advisory package. Here's the current arrival time for tropical storm force winds. I'll refresh this so we have the latest advisory info. You can see generally by Friday evening or Saturday morning, you can see tropical storm force winds extending into the northeast and Atlantic Canada. But I'd say if you're in here in the Northeast and Nova Scotia, have your preparations done by Friday afternoon. You don't want to be getting up if you're in central Halifax at 6 in the morning on Saturday to finish up some preparations. Just make sure you get your preparations done by, say, Friday afternoon. And of course, stay tuned to the Canadian Hurricane Center and your local weather office. In the US, it will be the National Weather Service. And stay tuned to the National Hurricane Center for the latest advisories on the storm. And stay tuned in Bermuda to the Bermuda Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center as well. I'm going to have links to all the agencies I just listed in the description below. But thank you all for watching. Stay safe in Bermuda and the Northeast and Atlantic Canada. I'll try and have these uploads more consistent as from here on out as the system comes north. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching.